I'll call to order the October Finance Committee meeting. We will begin with the consent items. There are a number of them on there. Would anyone like any pull? And I'll just, Mr. Montgomery, I'll start with you.
C2, C3A.
C2, C3B. Keep going.
And A.
C3A and B, okay.
Well, that's what I meant B. You right first time. B.
Okay. B.
And then C14.
C14. That was C2, C3B, and C14.
Yeah.
Would anyone else? Let me look through real quick. I've got C2 down.
Oh, you might want to speak about
C11, I'm going to pull C7.
Did it?
C11 we've got.
C3A.
And C3A, okay. Are there any others?
Mr. Chairman, if no more, I'll move for the approval.
Okay, we approve for the balance. Is there a second? There's a second. All in favor say aye. Aye. Opposed likewise. We will start, and I'll just call them out. We'll go alphabetically. C2.
Item C2, consideration of items relating to the use of housing assistance finance funds as match funds for a youth bill grant. A resolution authorizing housing assistance finance funds to be used as match funds for a Federal Department of Labor youth bill grant. And B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2014-2015.
Mr. Ritchie, Mr. Brooks, come up. Can you just give a 2-minute summary, then we'll see what questions people have?
Good afternoon, committee members.
Good afternoon.
This item is an item involving a youth bill grant that the city of Winston-Salem received in the amount of $1.1 million. It's for operating the training program whereby we train individuals between the ages of 16 and 26 that are high school dropouts. The goal of the grant is for one of those participants to receive either a GED or a high school diploma and one of the two. They can receive one of the two and receive a construction trade certification, which is recognized nationally. So we were awarded this grant, and as part of the grant, the city had to provide a match of $275,000. It was originally thought that we could use community development block grant funds as the match. We had done this before previously with some other grants, but it was under HUD and not the Department of Labor. This grant is a grant that's administered by the Department of Labor. We were notified by them doing an audit that federal funds could not be used as a match for this grant. So staff is seeking authorization to substitute the $275,000 that staff committed in community development block grant funds with housing finance funds, which would be a non-federal source of funding. And we provided some of the successes of the grant, which we think have been very tremendous with respect to the enrollment goal of 80 participants being met. Of that 80, 44% have successfully completed the program. We're in our second cohort now, so we anticipate, and it's 31 individuals, so we anticipate that number to increase significantly. We have 20 persons that have gone through the program that are employed. 7 have obtained their GED. 1 obtained an adult high school diploma. We're very proud of the fact that 2 are enrolled in college now, and 35 have received their nationally recognized construction trade certification. So we're seeking approval to substitute the source of funds for the match grant.
Okay. Ms. Montgomery, you.
Couple questions. First question is, this is a new grant, not the past grant that we have had with the youth.
Now, this is the grant that we received in 2012.
Okay, so this is the 2012 grant.
Yes.
And so how many total people are we able to serve under this grant? What are the total numbers?
under the grant, there was a goal of, they have two goals: assess 300, which means you have to assess 300 participants in a goal. 300 participants go through an initial assessment, and of the 300, the goal is to enroll and have 80 participants complete the program.
80 for 80 So I understand that piece. I'm just thinking of seem a lot of money spent on 80 people. But what, in terms of those, are those funding the administrative positions or the pay piece for the actual ones who are going through it?
It funds, I think, about 4 positions. You have a program manager, a construction instructor, an administrative assistant, and a case manager.
And
so you're funding 4 full-time positions, and you're also subsidizing the staff. The salaries are part of your internal staff if they're used in the process. And it also funds all of the equipment and other supplies and materials used, because as part of the program, one of the goals was to complete 2 houses. The participants were supposed to totally rehabilitate 2 houses, and part of those funds are set aside for the rehabilitation of those 2 properties.
And that's getting to my next place there, but so only 2 houses will be impacted by the program.
2 houses are scheduled to be impacted. We're actually completing 1, and we don't believe we're going to be able to start the other.
And the reason I'm asking that is because the request is to use housing finance assistance funds to substitute in this, and $275,000 in housing finance assistance fund, in my opinion, can be used greater impact on more properties used in other areas than 2 properties invested this way. I support the program. I just question the source of fund, because this fund does not have a additional source to replenish it, and $275,000 on 2 properties, that concerns me in terms of how that money could be used to impact more housing, more properties, rather than these 2 properties in this place. So that concerns me in terms of using this source.
Well, again, the 2 houses are only a part of the program itself. You still have the administrative, the overhead, the expenses for the training. It covers all of that because it's divided over a 3-year period.
Ms. Burke?
I think what would be...
Yes, I'm sorry. Excuse me, Dr. Burke. Salaries are also paid. The participants are paid a salary while they're working.
I was going to say thank you. What would be easier to see if you would break it down, and maybe you have to show up the salaries that's coming out of this money. Because when you look at federal jobs, a lot of times you pay folks to do the job more than sometimes the amount of money that you're spending. And I think a long time ago we looked at how we measure. We did that by giving, you have put 20, I saw down here, but I think what would help, after they complete the program, how do you follow them, track them, and then around about 5 or 6 years from now, can we say they're gainfully employed? Because I believe it's very important that we look at training people, and sometimes we may spend a little bit more to train them, but we need to know after the training how many years they stay in the job and what are they doing. Do similar like we look at our housing program. When we've given loans for housing, we can show that some of these people are still in these houses. We have very few who are not in those houses. You remember that, Mayor, we started
Very
that?
low foreclosure.
Mm-hmm.
And to address that, Dr. Burke, under this grant, the actual training program is 2 years. And there is a 12-month period that you have to track the participants after they graduate. And the only way you can count them as completing the program is when they are employed and remain employed for at least a minimum of 12 months. And we're required to track them for that 12 months after the initial 2-month training.
May you track them after the 12 months?
We can do that, yes.
Mr. McIntosh?
So this was a one-time deal, and we hired 4 people, and
They're temporary employees. When we hire through grant funding, it's clear in the hiring that the position is only here as long as the grants.
okay, so that we didn't create any permanent jobs with this. And flip side of that is we're not obligated beyond this project to continue to do this.
That's correct.
So the question really is, we thought we were going to be able to use federal money to match federal money, and now we're not.
And we're not.
Okay.
Ms. Adams?
Thank you. Mr. Brooks, you said that we assessed 300 applicants, and out of the 300, we gleaned, what, 80? No? Did we glean 80, or we started with 80 and we ended up with 66 or something? What? Because I don't, I'm looking at the report, and it talks about the 80 in the first bullet, talks about the 80 again in the second bullet, and then to date, 35 or 44%. So are we saying 35 out of the 80 are the ones that,
The 80 includes the first cohort and the second
okay,
cohort.
So,
The second cohort is what we're in now.
and that's 31, right?
Yes.
So we're talking about 66 people out of the 80 that we gleaned from the 300?
Yes.
Okay. My 2 questions, I guess, again, are we doing all that we can to market this program across the city to our citizens? And, we all know some family with a young man or woman who is not quite there where they need to be, and the family is at the end of the rope of trying to help them get there. I'd like to receive of the council how we market this program. Not saying your department hasn't done a great job, but again, I feel like, we can always be better. I think there's some areas where we're not reaching the population that needs to be reached. Another question would be, could we have used another funding source besides the housing finance funds? Could we have pulled, per the government, could we have pulled from some other area besides housing finance assistance funds?
In my opinion, it either would have been housing finance or general fund. It could not be another federal funding source. And with respect to your first question, we assessed 300. We probably interviewed close to 500 or 600. This particular program was a carryover of our construction training program, and every year we amass a huge waiting list of individuals that want to get in that program. It's one of our most widely advertised and well-accepted programs. We just don't have enough funds or staff to really address the number of individuals that want to participate in the program. But I will certainly look into that further for you.
And one more thing I think we talked about the last time that we had a report on this. Again, I respect the trade business of building houses and carpentry and woodwork and all of that, but I do fear, like I said, that business or that market is not what it was several years ago, and I don't think that market, in my perspective, would never regain where it was before the recession. I still want to know whether we can, are we mandated by the government to do that type of trade versus high-tech skill manufacturing, training, welding, and laboratory technology type jobs that operate at an entry level, whereas a person doesn't necessarily need a college degree to work in a lab. We all know that. I'm just wondering, could we switch up the program and make it more applicable to where we are right now, being a city of innovation and technology and that sort of thing?
With this particular grant, that was not an option. The grant itself was for construction training and educational attainment. That's what's mandated by the Department of Labor. We have no option of changing the training piece to that.
But that doesn't mean that, and we have senators and Congress people that we communicate with. If there is something that needs tweaking, don't get me wrong, those folks don't know at this level as to what we do and what our expectations are. I think maybe we would want to communicate with Senator Burr and the Congresswoman Fox, and I'm trying to think, there's nobody there for the 12th, is it? Senator Hagan, and other, politicians even throughout the state, whether we can just add to the language because of the times that we live in, and the data will bear us out, that construction is great business for those that's making money commercial-wise. But right now, I think we need to understand, again, our audience and our customers, in that we need to be looking at getting to where the mark has been moved to. And it's definitely, the data bears out. It's not in construction. So I would ask the city manager to investigate that with our lobbyists, Ms. Mazingo, and those, that we need to move on that. But other than that, my only concern, again, just like the other council members on the committee, is the reporting of how much money are we spending on salaries and things. I'd like to see that broke out versus the success rates, as Councilmember Burke said, of where these people are, tracking them through to the next level. Other than that, I commend your department on what you're doing, but you know how we are. We always can be better.
Thank you. And the salary is minimum salary. They're paid a minimum, it's called a stipend, actually, not a salary. They're paid minimum wage stipend, and we will certainly pursue what you have asked. And in response to that, we are constantly on the lookout for other grant opportunities that we can avail ourselves to that would provide training in other areas other than construction.
I have just a few questions. First off, I have gleaned from your comments that this is a multi-year program and that we are not finished with it.
It's correct. It's a 3-year
But
program.
the reason you're here today is we've got an issue with the funding. We've got to do some substitution.
Correct.
With. I think it would be good at the appropriate time, and that may be at the completion of the program, to come back with exactly how many we started with, how many you finished with. That'll give us a feel for attrition, and then kind of how many did this, that, and the other.
Sure. We can
I will say this. I have a hard time balancing the numbers because someone could have been certified, gotten a degree, and employed. They can meet. You just can't add up the 20 that are employed, the 8 that got high school degrees, the 2 in college, and the 35 that got certified, because there's multiple categories. But
We can provide a better breakout for you.
when will the program be finished?
It was 2012, and it's 3 years, so 13, 14, 14, 15, end of 15.
Yeah, okay. I'm not. I guess if you want to provide an interim report, that's fine. But I think at the end, it would be good for us to assess the program once you have all the data.
We can do both.
Okay. Do I have a motion to? Yes, sir. You have a question?
I did. It was 2 more things. One, it was similar comment to Councilmember Adams in reference to the actual things they're being trained to do. It was about a year ago within the same thing I'd asked similar questions. But even in the sense of the residential portion, I don't know if there was opportunity for us to look at potentially partnering with other individuals who are doing construction, such as construction that has been taking place downtown within Biotech Place and Innovation Quarter, to at least allow for those individuals to see the possibility of what is there beyond the construction of one, they're helping to build something there, but help them see themselves actually inside those places working, which I think is, for some of our communities, a struggle for them to actually see themselves in those roles and in those jobs. And just wondering if there's opportunity for us to be a little creative within the guidelines of the grant as it is now, but to be creative in terms of how we give them that opportunity to look beyond where they are in that place. Is just something I'd ask. And the other part, back to the funding source, my question would be, again, I'd hate to vote against this on Monday because of the funding source and housing finance assistance funds, but this committee and others know how consistent I've been, particularly on those funds being used specifically on the housing side of things. And I know we were looking at 2 properties being impacted by this, but I think from economic development funds, debt repayment funds, those dollars go towards job creation and job training as well. And I would ask that we look at one of those funding sources outside of the Housing Finance Assistance Fund. That would be my request of this committee and council as well.
I can't address that last question, but with respect to the first question, we were pretty locked into this grant. The grant itself specifically wanted the youth to rehabilitate 2 residential structures. It mentioned that 2 residential structures. It wasn't an option to be creative here. Department of Labor was very specific in what they wanted and how they wanted it done. Actually, a little stiff-necked about it, to be honest with you. Very stiff-necked. But we will We will certainly share that and pursue that.
One thing I might add, Councilman Montgomery, is that we are proposing returning the $275,000 of CBGB funds, and those could be used for housing purposes.
Those restricted, though.
Right. They're restricted to eligible housing purposes.
May I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Since you mentioned that they were set on what they wanted to do, it goes back to what Councilmember Adams said. We need to be dialoguing with the folks who represent us. Maybe they could have some influence, because I found that people who are in Washington or Raleigh, they cannot always identify like they should. And I believe the councilwoman said maybe you could see Ms. Zingo. Maybe she could relate some of that kind of information to them.
We'll follow up on that.
Mr. Brooks, there seems to be a lot of questions. Is this time sensitive? I know you. Yes, okay.
It's time the Department of Labor has said they would like for us to have this.
All right, then we will dissolve it. It's just like, people are asking, well, why can't we work on a commercial building versus a house? Well, we've learned it's because it's coming from HUD, which is
Department of Labor.
Excuse me, Department of Labor. Their program says you got to use it on a house, and you got to use it on this and that. So I guess it's been an educational thing for the folks sitting up here. Do I have a motion on it?
I move for approval.
Second.
Okay, we have a motion and a second as presented. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
Abstain.
Abstaining? So we have 3 in favor, 0 opposed, and 1 abstaining. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. The next item that was pulled is C, 3A and B. We'll just do C, 3A first.
Resolution authorizing submission of continuum of care homeless grant application, acceptance of grant funds, and execution of agreement.
Mr. Brooks, did you enjoy your time resting?
Vacation.
Yes. But
Would you give us a 2-minute summary?
Tim West is our resident homeless guru,
Okay.
and Mr. Grant will present this item. Not Mr. Grant, Mr. West. Tim West. That one. Yes, that one.
West will
Needs to be called after Mr. Grant, for sure. My name is Tim West. I am in Community and Business Development Department, not in Recreation. And good afternoon. This is the annual item for the HUD Continuum Care Grants, for which the city serves as the applicant. The proposed grants fund housing and related services for homeless persons in the community. Funds are also included for the Homeless Management Information System, in which all agencies must participate in order to get HUD funds. The proposals here have been reviewed by a grant rating panel, as well as by the Council on Services for the Homeless and the Commission on Ending Homelessness. The grants are listed in 2 separate items, as has been noted. The request is for authorization to submit the grant application to HUD, execute agreements with HUD for funds awarded, execute agreements with the agencies for the funds, and then to submit other information to HUD as required. And I'd be glad to try to answer any questions.
Ms. Adams, you requested this. Do you have any
Yes.
specific questions?
Thank you, Mr. Clark. My question is, we have Exhibit A and we have Exhibit B. The report with both are the same. I need to understand what's the difference in them, and and also I'd like to see, as I always ask for, how many people are directly affected. We need numbers and data with the money. But again, C3 and CB, C3A, C3B, have 2 different data charts of the funding. What's the difference, Mr. Brooks?
The costs are essentially the same. You have an item A and an item B, and I believe it's the item B. There are 5 items that's associated with the Bethesda Center, of which Councilmember Montgomery is now affiliated with. Of those 5 items, 3 are involving a total of approximately $500,000+. No? Yeah, the whole thing involves approximately $500,000.
We're on page 69.
The Bethesda Center piece that is directly associated with Councilmember Montgomery is only involving $95,000. So relatively a small portion of the total amount of the $500,000 would directly be impacted by Council Member Montgomery's association with the organization.
Okay,
But we clearly wanted to divide so he would have an opportunity to.
So you basically, they are all the same, we just took his out because he'll probably be
That's
abstaining.
correct.
Right.
Okay. Okay. If we could stick to A then, since that's what we're dealing with now.
Okay.
But everybody keep in mind, you can turn to page 69 and look at what's left.
To address Ms. Adams' questions about the numbers, in A, which is the $1.6 million amount, the estimate of the persons who would be housed by those grants in a year is about 400 over the course of a year. And that's estimating conservatively. Sometimes these grants, they do exceed in performance the estimates.
Do you have a little write-up you could give us on each one of these for the meeting? I'm not talking about pages, I'm talking about
About a 2-3 sentence.
4 or 5 sentences, something like that.
Sure.
That would be nice for the council.
With some key data for each one.
Yeah, and a few comments on what they do. Yes, Ms. Brooks?
That's a good point, Councilmember Clark. I was looking here, and some years ago, we looked at this long list, and we talked about are you all, are you doing some things in one? Seems to me like this ought to be on the one department. We have all these different agencies coming asking for money, and I don't believe, it's not that I'm against the homeless, but I will vote for it, I want you to know. But I don't see how through the years that you've worked with this program, if you've heard some things that have been said about these agencies look like they're doing the same thing. We give so much for this one and so much for that one. From your point of view, is there any way that you consolidate this a different way?
I think what we've done is to try to build on the strengths of the agencies that serve different populations. And we have transformed the system. If any of you have heard presentations on the 10-year plan to end homelessness, what we have done is to develop a coordinated intake and assessment system, which is actually funded as part of these grants. It's 48115. Oh, it's grant number 3. And what we do is we meet weekly as a group of agencies, and we actually assess cases and place people in different housing programs. The grants are divided for some of the reasons that HUD requires as far as populations they serve, and once they put them there, that's where we pretty much have to keep them. But when we meet and we put someone in a program, it's usually either one of two types. A lot of them are administered by the Housing Authority for us. So we are restricted to some degree by what HUD requires.
If I could follow up on Ms. Burks, and I see Ms. Wellman in the back, so I'll ask her because she might be the expert here. But I think where we're getting at is line 6 is for experiment self-reliance, line 7 is for that, line 11 and 13. Are those different programs? Is that why they're broken out?
Yes. Okay. We have one that's for the 5th Street apartments on 5th Street, and that's just a discrete grant. And when 5th Street 2 was built a few years later, there was a grant that was for rental assistance for those units. When we applied for staff to assist with the rapid rehousing program, there was a grant that was done a few years later for that case management. Those are examples of how grants are built up over the years and do provide additional housing and services for people in the community.
So the fact that there are multiple names on here means there's multiple programs.
Right.
And when you give us a little summary, you'll explain all that. Okay. Ms. Burke, do you have any more questions?
No, I don't have any more.
Ms. Adams, you have a question?
Yes, thank you. On page 65, it says in the paragraph, the second paragraph, it says the programs differ by type of activity and population served. And again, that goes back to if we had some data or information about what the programs, who they're targeting. But then it also says HUD has indicated that there may be insufficient funding to fund all projects. Should this occur, HUD will select projects and funding amounts. Mr. Brooks, is this going back to last year when the money they were late with payments and things, and we kind of helped out by giving the agencies money until they receive money? Is that similar to this type of deal? Thank you.
I think it's item B that you referred to. Am I correct?
Yes. That's not, I thought that was in, that's also in A. Yes. Okay, it's also in C3A. You're welcome.
Yeah, I see what, it's on page 59. Yeah. Thank you, Ms. Carmen.
I mean, is that,
Yeah, I remember that.
Make it short.
I will.
I remember those because the funding cycle was different, and it one expired, and it was a couple months lapse before the next funding kicked in, and so we bridged it.
The HUD agreements were simply delayed last year, is when you guys pitched in and helped the agencies through about a half a year through which the funding was delayed.
How's this year looking? Delayed?
Yeah, it's going a little bit slow, but the pieces that you put in place have made it possible for us to cross that bridge, and then once the grants are in place, they're awarded. It's just a matter of moving the money back.
Okay, Mr. McIntosh.
This language here says that there may be insufficient funding to fund all projects. It doesn't sound like a matter of timing. It sounds like a matter of...
It's not a timing issue. They could simply reject projects that are on the list. That's true as well. And
So we're submitting this list. We're not, don't know if they're going to approve it.
That's correct.
Okay? All right.
one more question.
One more question from
One
Ms.
more
Allen.
question. Those agencies that own property, we assist with that as well? I mean, when they do that, how does that work?
Rental assistance can be provided either on a tenant basis, like Section 8 assistance, which is what most of the rental assistance grants are, but it can also be project-based. And the only project-based grants that we have are for Fifth Street and for Fifth Street 2, and that's rental assistance for those projects.
And that money goes to the agency?
It goes to pay the tenant's rent, and yes, it does.
Yeah, so the agency, if they own it, they get that money?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Any other questions?
Just how many people are here from these agencies? I
Yeah,
know
yeah, if you're-
faithfully, Miss Webben always comes. Where are they from, Mr.?
If y'all could just maybe stand up, introduce yourselves, and maybe which agencies you're with.
I'm Georgia Shepherd, Family Services.
Thank you.
I'm Shawani Don from DSR.
Thank you.
Karen Ralph, Assistant Housing Authority.
Thank you. Would y'all like to say anything? Okay. Do I have a motion on this?
I move for approval.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise. We will now move to C3B, which is the same issue. We've just broken out the things related to the Bethesda Center. Mr. Montgomery?
Yes, I need to make a statement for the record. That is, I've asked for this item to be pulled from the agenda because I need the record to reflect that I have abstained from voting on this said item at committee level and will request City Council formally excuse me from voting on Monday, October the 27th, due to my conflict as being Executive Director of the Bethesda Center.
Move.
Do we need to approve that?
You don't?
No.
We'll do it Monday night.
Oh, you do it
Okay,
officially
all right.
Monday.
Since we've just discussed this, are there any other questions for this one? Is there a motion?
Move for approval of C3B.
Second.
We have a second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed and
Abstain.
abstaining. We have 3 in favor, none opposed, and 1 abstaining. Thank you, Mr. Montgomery. We will now move to, let me get my list here, C7.
Item C7, consideration of items relating to the 2014 Solving Cold Cases with DNA Grant Award. A, resolution authorizing the execution of a memorandum of understanding between the City of Winston-Salem, the City of Greensboro, the City of High Point, and the Center for Advanced Forensic Data for Forensic DNA for DNA testing. And B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2014-2015.
Chief, welcome. Could you give us just a 2-minute introduction to this? This was a new program, at least I think it's new, because I don't remember reading about it before.
Yes, good evening. This is a DNA cold case grant that we applied for. We actually received official approval September the 12th of 2014. This will be a grant that will be between the Winston-Salem Police Department, the Greensboro Police Department, and High Point Police Department. The priorities for the grant is to use DNA analysis to solve cold case homicides.
Okay. I'm glad to hear we're collaborating with our sister cities. Was that part of the requirement, or was just, how did we get into this?
Yes, we applied for the grant last year, but we did not get it.
Okay.
So a lot of times the grant proposals are stronger if you have more than one agency.
Gotcha. Thank you. Any questions on this?
Move for approval.
Is there a second? All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed likewise? Thank you, Chief. C7 is done. We'll now move to C11.
Item C11, consideration of items relating to the issuance of City of Winston-Salem water and sewer system revenue funding bonds. A resolution of the City Council of the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, requesting the Local Government Commission's approval of the city's water and sewer system revenue refunding bonds and certain related matters. And B, bond order authorizing the issuance of not to exceed $56 million water and sewer system revenue refunding bonds of the City of Winston-Salem, North Carolina, authorizing the approval, execution, and delivery of various documents in connection with the issuance of such bonds, providing for the sale of the bonds, setting forth the terms and conditions on which the bonds are to be issued, and providing for certain other matters in connection with the issuance, sale, and delivery of the bonds.
Ms. Saunders, if you could give us just a 2-minute on this one, and I may also look to Mr. Turner to remind us of what the project is from a dollar standpoint, but I'll let you go first.
Okay. Good afternoon, Chairman Clark and members of the council. Attached is a resolution to apply to the Local Government Commission to refund the bonds or basically refinance the debt. This is Series 2005 Water and Sewer Revenue Bonds. At current market rates, this would save the city about $5.8 million. As of the time I wrote this resolution, rates have actually gotten better since the end of last week, and it's up to about 6.8 today. So it's a very favorable situation for us to be in, and we look for your authority to go forward with this process. If you approve the application to the LGC, it actually goes before the commission. They're meeting in November, and then we would sell these bonds, if the market conditions are favorable, November the 13th. This gives us authority to sell. If for some reason the market conditions weren't favorable, we wouldn't sell.
But this is 100% refinancing?
Yes.
Because I understand there is a large water and sewer revenue bond for next year for the, okay.
Potentially.
Potentially, okay.
We'll be watching it, but we're thinking that that's based on some of the state loans that we've gotten.
Okay.
It's sort of extended our normal process of when we've had to issue water and sewer revenue bonds, but based on our cash flow projection, we're looking at closer to the end of calendar year 2015.
So this sounds like a no-brainer, $6.8 million savings over the lifetime. Any questions? Do I have a motion?
Move for approval.
Second.
All in favor, say aye. Aye. Opposed likewise? Chairman will take full credit for the $6.8 million savings.
Sure.
5.8.
The mayor
Or
said,
5. Yeah,
Look.
and if I talk too long, it may go down, so let's keep going here.
the mayor say, watch out there, he's going to take credit.
Last one on here was C14, please.
Item C14, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into an agreement for professional transportation engineering services related to Business 40 Rehabilitation Project, Davenport Engineering, $290,000.
I don't remember who asked. Did you ask for that one?
I
Mr.
did.
Montgomery.
This was pulled more specifically to ask a question about the larger impact of the Business 40 piece, and just to go on record in reference to the other work associated with Business 40 improvements, particularly the Martin Luther King corridor piece, and wanted to understand exactly where we are with that and when we would see anything taking place with that.
Mr. Turner.
The Martin Luther King Jr. Drive project, as the council may recall, is a project that you agreed to put in part of the money, 10%. The Creative Corridors Coalition agreed to put in 10%. And the rest of the money is coming from federal money that the Transportation Advisory Committee has approved and delegated for the project. At this point, we have council's money. We are awaiting an agreement between the city and the Creative Corridors Coalition and their money. So at this point, what we have to do is receive their funding. We need to go back to the Creative Corridors Design and Review Committee with a revised design that takes into consideration the historic group's interest and the realities of how much funding is available. We'll get everybody's approval, and then we'll be ready to move forward with the project.
Do we have any idea how successful they are coming with their fundraising?
Not a good idea, no, sir.
And I asked that question because there are some of the areas that will be impacted by some of the improvements along Martin Luther King, and some of the property owners have waited on doing additional things to their properties, waiting to see what would take place. And now we have a couple property owners who are getting ready to put money. They're putting fences up in some places, and they may be again impacted. So how do we help them not spend money on making improvements and then be impacted again by improvements that come along with this? And need to get some sense of timing so that that can be shared with property owners along the area.
We've been in communications recently with the Creative Corridors group, and we will let them know about the interest of the property owners along there to get their issues resolved.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you. I think this is just for information, I believe. No,
There's a resolution.
there's a resolution.
This is a contract for work
Yeah,
on
for the work
business.
on it. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise.
But before we went to the
Excuse me.
motion, I was just going to
I'm
make
sorry.
this observation. A lot of times people criticize and they say certain things, but if we would look at all the improvements that this city has made with infrastructure, with transportation, and two, I think we need to do more in marking it off, because then they get to see their dollars that they're spending. And I think in some way, Mr. City Manager, you and Mr. Ray Turner, with that department that we have, maybe we need to sometimes say, see how your dollars are being spent. I mean, when we listened last week at the Liberty Street Market, when Mr. Gilmore said 1962, they were scooping up red mud for 52, and then we looked at where we are today, we've made a tremendous forward move. And then when you ride in the expressway and you look over to downtown, we see more tall buildings than we've had. I think that sometimes we take for granted, and we don't really say what we're actually doing. And also, Mr. Chairman, you can get credit as as finance chair, you know.
Don't worry. If it's good, I'll take credit.
Yeah, okay.
There is a motion. Oh, excuse
I
me.
just do want to point out, this is a local firm, too, that
Yes.
we're hiring. Good.
All in favor of the motion, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, likewise. That finishes the consent agenda. We will now move to the general agenda. There are 3 items on it. We will begin with number 1. If you'll read it, please.
Item G1, consideration of items relating to Federal Transit Administration funds for fiscal year 2014, enhanced mobility for seniors and individuals with disabilities. A, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into grant agreements with subrecipients to receive pass-through Federal Transit Administration funds for enhanced mobility of seniors and individuals with disabilities for the Winston-Salem urban area, and B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for fiscal year 2014-2015.
So, Mr. Turner, this is similar to the one we just had in the consent where we are passed through to various agencies. Would you mind commenting on this just a minute?
As the description indicated, this is pass-through money, and as you just indicated, it's pass-through money. In this case, it's transportation for primarily for folks who have disabilities, or in some cases, seniors, and it's coming from the Federal Transportation Administration. There are 4 agencies that will receive this money. We've got information on their service levels that they provided in the most recent information available to us, and that's indicated on page 2 of the item. Be happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Okay.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Turner. I know we have TransAid, right?
Yes, ma'am.
How does that fit with all of this? I mean, their numbers versus these numbers. I mean, basically, TransAid does some of this too, do they not?
Yes, ma'am, and in fact, you'll see some of these are filling in for times when TransAid is not providing the service, or are providing service to areas where TransAid does not provide service. If you look at NEPAT, service for seniors, 24 hours a day. So they're filling in a gap of time when TransAid is not providing the service.
I guess I would like to see in the council the data of how many riders is TransAid handling as well. And I'm just trying to figure out, don't get me wrong, like, where are they going late at night? Unless it's to the hospital or emergency room somewhere, I'm just trying to figure out where this type of transportation is taking our people. Don't look at me like that, Councilmember Light.
You know where I've seen some of them going to the sweepstakes. I don't know if that's what honest to God.
All right.
I mean, it's the truth.
But, Mr. Turner, that's what I'm asking for, as Councilmember Clark said, a little bit more information. I mean, we're not asking for the identity of the riders. We're just asking for some of the destinations that this ridership is going to and the destinations that our Transaid also takes people. That's all.
Okay, Mr. Montgomery.
And my question is similar on the hands-on Northwest North Carolina one in terms of the medical appointment pieces. To me, I'm not sure the hours that they operate that, but again, that seems more of a Transaid operation piece, and wondering if those who are impacted by that portion of the medical appointment piece, what happens if that dollar amount, which is may not be a whole lot, is used within Transaid? Is that able to increase our ability to serve better in that area? Again, I'm not sure the hours they operate there or service areas, which may be different, but that's interesting to know for that area.
We'll provide what we can for your Thursday package.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions or comments on item 1? Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed likewise.
Abstain.
And 1 abstention. So that's 3 in favor, none opposed.
And I just have one more comment,
Yes, ma'am.
Chair. In that, going forward, as we know, as this council, we are looking more forward, as Councilmember Burke said, as to how we do business with all of these entities and all of this money. And for some of us now, this council is beginning to me, merge to be able to ask those important questions that we need to be asking for ourselves when we're making these decisions. So I see it as a plus positive for us as a team.
Okay. We will now go to G2, please, if you read it.
Item G2, consideration of items relating to Federal Transit Administration funds for fiscal year 2014 Job Access Reverse Commute. A, resolution authorizing the city manager to enter into grant agreements with subrecipients to receive pass-through Federal Transit Administration funds for job access and reverse commute programs for the Winston-Salem urban area, and B, ordinance amending the project budget ordinance for the fiscal year 2014-2015.
Mr. Chairman, this item is very similar to the previous item, except that these trips are primarily for people who need access to jobs.
Okay. All right. I will ask, and you've got some good information here, but I'm looking at Family Services wants $45,000 to serve 67 people. And here to there gets $10,000 for 2,000 riders. Sounds a little high.
Sounds a little.
I think what I'm hearing from all of us, and I haven't commented on number 1, is we do have a Transaid service that the city runs and funds, yet there seem to be a lot of other people providing auxiliary services. And is it a case that there just aren't enough Transaid buses, or what? So I think there's just a general understanding of why are they different, and why. And it may just be that, and I'll just take your comment on people going to work. I do know with Transaid it's plus or minus 30 minutes or something pickup time.
It's more than that typically.
Okay, well, if you're going to work, you can't have plus or minus an hour or so. So it may be a situation like that where folks going to work need to know I'm going to be picked up at a very, very specific time and get delivered so I can work at the time. Anyway, just be curious for information. Yes, ma'am, Ms. Burke.
I need to ask the distance. How far do I live from my job that I can get to that job through this service?
I think these are anywhere in Forsyth County, Councilmember Burke.
I need to know a little bit more than that, because we used to have a problem, people not able to get from here further out Stratford Road at one time.
All right.
We'll provide you some information.
And again, within that information, again, for this one, the ways to work piece, location, where they're going, where they're being picked up from. Because if there is there a bus stop within walking distance of other areas? How are we leveraging all of that together?
Okay.
10-4.
Any other items, questions on G2?
Move for approval.
There's a motion, is there a second?
I'm second with that understanding.
Okay, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? 4 in favor, none opposed, none abstentions. We'll now move to number G3.
Item G3, Minority and Women Business Enterprise Program recommendation.
Mr. Page.
Good afternoon, Chairman Clark and members of the committee. Back in August, this item was reported to you all, and at that point, the committee directed staff to go back and review the various MWBE disparity studies from the 4 cities that we were looking at the time, Greensboro, Charlotte, Memphis, Tennessee, and Columbia, South Carolina, and figure out if there were things that we could implement from those, look at similarities between those studies in terms of if there were things that we could implement within our program without incurring the cost of a disparity study. So we've gone back and looked at those 4 studies, as well as we had actually earlier this year contracted with Sustainable Community Resources to look at some best practices in the MWBE industry. So between those 2 things, as well as the third thing, actually we conducted a survey of our local certified MWBE firms back in August, September, to get input from them as to what their needs were to enhance the MWBE program. So those 3 things combined, you have a list in front of you of 8 bullet points that I'd just like to go through that we feel that we could recommend as part of the city's MWBE program. We believe that all of these enhancements can be made to the program without changes to the plan. However, if changes to the plan are needed, we'll bring those back before the end of the calendar year. But just I'll go through these 8 bullet points now and sort of get direction from the Finance Committee as to the implementation of these. But the first one is to go back and to reinstitute or expand our vendor rotation on contracts, estimated to be less than $20,000. We actually used to do this in some areas, but there was some concern about not going with the lowest responsible bidder. But we can, in fact, go back to this system of having some type of rotation on contracts for vendors. There's several different ways you can do a rotation. For example, you have 20 people that do painting. You can say that the top 5 on the list are the only ones we're going to accept painting bids from. Those 5 then go to the list. The next 5 come up, and you keep rotating through that system. So only those 5 would they still be competitively bidding, but bidding against each other. The other is you have that 20 on the list. Number 1, number 2, we set a price internally for what we think that contract amount is. So then you just go down the list. We get a bid from number 1 on the list, then we get a bid from number 2 on the list, and each time we get a painting contract, then the one that gets the bid goes to the bottom. We just rotate. So there's several different ways that you can do rotation, but that's something we could look at if that's something that council would allow us to explore further and come back with a couple of options for how we might do a vendor rotation for rehabilitation projects, construction projects, and service contracts, all under $20,000.
May I ask a question,
Yes, ma'am.
Mr. Chairman? When we were talking about this MWBE long years ago, and people were asking us to do better, and the staff would say they were doing, and the attorney would say, we can't do certain things. Were we not being as creative as we should have been? This is to anyone who was working with the program. It's a simple question. And when we had some of the council people to continue to say we need to do a better job, and I commend this council for believing we should do a better job. Did it take that, Mr. City Manager, for us to be more creative in how we were addressing this concern?
I think to some degree, I also think that the current city attorney is more willing to look at creative solutions to meet the council's objectives.
And I'm not saying, but she was also the attorney when we were trying to get things done, but now she is seeing how creative her office can be.
Yes, ma'am.
Because she's been the city attorney for a good while.
Yes, ma'am.
All right, thank you.
If I could ask, and I did have some questions on this rotation, but let's say we had 20 people that can paint, and you go out, and you just go down the list. You put them in groups of 5s, and then the next 5, and just keep going. If somebody that's not in that 5 submitted a bid, can you legitimately turn it down?
I believe
let's say you sent bids to the first 5 painters. If someone further down submitted a bid, and it was the low bid, could you decline it?
You can, because again, for contracts that are under $20,000, you can set your program guidelines. You have a lot more flexibility than you do for contracts that are basically over the $30,000 limit. So you're essentially sending the invite to those 5 in the group, and
Okay.
only those 5.
Right.
Okay. Going back to Mr. Page, do we have many items or services that we buy regularly that have that enough vendors that this would make sense?
We'd have to look at them by category, Councilman Clark, for example. In the rehab department, we actually used to do this, where you had maybe...
What was that again?
In the housing rehab area.
Rehab, okay.
We probably had 10 to 12 who we would look at. In mowing, for example, there's probably a good 15 to 20 that do mowing service contracts. So it just depends on what the trades are. But yes, probably across the board, you're able to identify. Now, keep in mind that this wouldn't just be MWBE firms. This would be all painting firms. So you might have 20 painting firms. Of the 20, 10 might be, or 7 might be MWBE. So this would be all painting firms in that area that would be competing, but they'd be competing against a much smaller pool. So it drastically increases the opportunities to be a successful bidder.
You say we did this a long time ago?
As recently as 2 years ago.
What were your reflections on it?
I'll let Richie, who actually administered a similar program in housing, I think it was fairly successful.
Please move down the list, right?
Our experience with the vendor rotation and housing rehabilitation worked very well. It was not our choice to end that process. We were told that in order to comply with some state regulations, we had to do so. But I thought the program worked very well. You were getting a number. You increased the opportunity for MWBEs to get work tremendously when you do that.
Thank you. Ms. Carmen.
If I may, Councilman Clark, I think one of the concerns a couple of years ago was the category, the dollar amount. For contracts that are under $20,000, again, you have a lot more flexibility than you do for contracts that are over that amount. So it's a matter of segregating the contracts so that you can, for those that are $20,000 or less, you can do pretty much within a lot more. But for those that are greater, then you had to literally abide by the statute and so forth. So it's a matter of separating those out.
May I ask one question? Who will be looking at these contracts?
Let me.
to make that
You need to go to the mic.
Yeah.
You're not being
Yeah.
preserved for prosperity here. You gave your name and address for the record. Go ahead, Ms. Carmen.
Yeah, who will be looking at doing this project?
I guess it would be the Community and Business Development Department along with my department and the manager's office, and
So-
purchasing as well, so the 4 departments.
Well, just give an example. If you had what we just talked about, then it would be someone from your department, that department. How would it be a committee of you looking at it?
I'll let Mr. Brooks come up and answer the logistics of the program.
For the rehabilitation program, bids are let, and we receive the bids. There is a housing rehabilitation committee that's made up of city staff. You have city's finance director, assistant city manager, and someone from the budget office. They're the 3 voting members, and there's 1 other member. And all cases are then presented to the loan committee, who would either approve or disapprove the application, generally upon staff's recommendation. And what we're doing is processing to ensure that we have applied with all applicable federal regulations or any other regulations that are required.
Mr. Chairman, I was interested in the loan committee. Maybe that's what I need to know who would be the loan committee?
If we were to do this today, that loan committee is still in existence, and we still take loans to that committee. Currently, that's Lisa Saunders, Mr. Page, Ben Rao, and someone from Revenue. Yeah, those are the 3 voting.
And the person who will be in charge of the program from your office, if we were looking at something? Do you have a person?
The Housing Rehabilitation Program is administered by Sharon Johnson, who's our Senior Rehabilitation Project Supervisor for Housing.
But there will be someone, what would Mr. Furby, when I hear another person you have with the small business people, don't you have two in that office?
Yes, we have Ken Millett. He's our Senior Project Supervisor over Business Development. And as you remember, we're in the well, you may not remember, but we're in the process of reviewing all of our business loans and reassessing and re-engineering them to work on a more organized, well, I won't say organized, in another way to process the business loans that are very similar to the way we're processing the housing loans, because generally most of them involve construction. It's all construction of some type. So they're closely related. There is a separate business loan committee that the business loans go to.
The reason I bring that up is because we've done some business that's not been quite as business-like, and I would like to know which department, if it's the business department, who from that department will make that decision to move things either forward or to just not have them go any place.
The first review would be by myself. I generally look at all the packages that are prepared to go to the loan committee, and once I review them and make my comments or recommendations and suggestions, then they are forwarded to the committee.
Okay, thank you. There are 8 items. That was just number 1. So
That's number 1.
Mr. Page, keep going. Let me just say on that one, there seems to be a general interest. I think the next thing on that one would be to come up and put some specifics how the program would do, and maybe some areas that you would recommend that we try it.
Okay.
Something like that. Okay.
On the second bullet point is, as opportunities arise, just continue to set the goals higher than 10% based upon the scope of work, historical participation, and availability of MWBE. So right now, it's a minimum of 10, but we'll continue to set it higher wherever possible.
Okay. Any questions on that one, Mr. Montgomery?
The only thing that challenged me on that is the statement of the availability of MWBEs, in that sense of making sure that the process of making sure that we have those MWBEs is a true process of actually engaging the community to find those. Because sometimes we say it and sometimes they're out there, but you just got to look. And then in some areas, like we know that, there's some that they're not there. And so making sure that in those particular categories that we make sure that we do have a good pool.
And I think one of our latter recommendations, Councilman Montgomery, will get to your concern. As we talk about enhancing the marketing of the program.
Okay, number 3.
Okay, item 3 is just to, and this is part of it, to enhance the outreach and education of the MWBE firms to make sure they're aware of what is available to them, such as quick pay agreements, bonding insurance assistance, joint venturing, and partnering. Right now, it's sort of mentioned and glazed over as part of a conversation of the pre-bid conference, but we sort of talk about, here's some things in good faith that are looked at, but working with the MWBEs to make sure that they know, here's something you can ask for of the general contract when you enter into a contract with them. We're not certain we're doing a real good job of making them aware that is there available for them already.
Do we periodically do training? It may not be the right word, but ongoing education. And I know if some vendor maybe heard it a couple years ago, maybe needs a refresher. Do we periodically hold sessions so folks can come in and we can comment on these type of things?
Correct.
Okay.
We do, but we probably need to do a better job of it.
All right. Okay.
Mr. Chairman.
Yes, ma'am.
Bonding, will that still be an issue? That's been one.
It has been an issue for years with some of the smaller firms, and it probably still is. We still hear it as an issue with some of the MWBEs, so yes.
Okay. Number 4.
Okay. Number 4 is actually in the employee's evaluation. Right now, it's real general language of adhering to purchasing guidelines, including MWBE. making sure that those employees that have the ability to make purchases, either through a purchasing card or either through their responsibilities, but are held accountable to make sure that folks recognize this is a significant part of your job too. And the managers actually started sending emails out just reminding folks that all of us have some responsibility to both local and MWB, but make sure we're holding people accountable when it comes time to their evaluations.
Yes, forthcoming, I'd like the council to get a report as to draw a line in the sand where we were moving forward, Mr. City Manager, as to comparatives. You know what I mean?
Yes.
Trends.
We're working right now, Ms. Saunders, Mr. Bates from Purchasing Department, and the MWB group. We're working to put a report together for you that'll show you last year where we drew a line in the sand for all of our discretionary spending under $20,000, as well as all the formal spending. So you can track it all, purchase cards included. And it is my intent that by the end of this fiscal year, you will see a significant increase.
Thank you.
Okay.
And one thing I'd also like to see is particularly if any of the individuals or businesses that we've been contracting with in the past, have they crossed over into what they weren't
Compliant.
well, no, they weren't MWBE, but now they've changed over into MWBE. You understand what I'm saying? Sometimes people try to play the game.
Okay.
Just wondering, just at least looking at that, I'm sure it won't be a whole lot, but in terms of just kind of seeing this ownership change in any of these businesses.
And I understand it's in here somewhere in the information, that we use the state certification program.
Yes.
And there's 244
In Forsyth
for
County.
Forsyth County. Do you have that list readily available?
It is online. We could probably have it for you by the end of this meeting if you need it.
Just
Yeah,
send it
yeah,
with the
just send it
Thursday
to us.
packet. It's just
Put it in
like
the
an
Thursday
awful
packet.
lot, 200.
Yeah.
Does it say
Okay.
kind of what trade they're in?
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
Okay, thank you. I know that's not.
We'll put it in everyone's Thursday
Okay,
packet.
next one, please.
Okay. Encourage general contractors or primes on formal projects with vertical construction to enter into joint venture agreements with MWBE firms, particularly on construction management at risk. The key word is there, encourage it. Legally, we cannot require it, but we can encourage it, especially if it's construction management at risk projects. Something that we've not done in the past, but something that we could definitely do more of and take a look at.
Can you define how you encourage and give me some examples of encouragement?
I think you'd have those sessions early on in the pre-bid, letting them know that it's important to council. We'd really like you to look at it. There's nothing legally that you can do to make them or to mandate it, but what we can do is just, one of the ways we've talked about trying to encourage it, and this would be something we can bring back in a additional recommendation to you all, is to put incentives in there for doing it. So you put some type of incentive. We have to have a conversation with Angela and her staff as to what can you incentivize as a public sector, but there has to be some type of sweetener for the prime contractor as another way that we can look at doing that or something.
But in a scoring matrix, you could weight that as higher than some of the other things. Would that be legal to do that?
Legally, you're doing that right now as part of good faith, but at the end of the day, if it's the only thing they've not done as a good faith effort, there's still a good chance that they can make good faith. So I think that the other ways you have to try to get there is figure out if there's some type of incentive. I don't think we can do disincentives, but is there some type of incentive that you can provide for doing it?
Thanks.
Okay. Oh, go ahead.
And particularly, I know this is specific to this contracting piece, but question I'd like to know is on our economic development actions, do we also encourage, is there any conversation with the vendors and the vending practices in terms of those who we attract in terms of who they buy their paper from, who they purchase their napkins, who they do those? Are those ever any part of the conversations that take place on that side?
there's language in the contract that Angela puts in there that encourages hire local, local suppliers, local vendors, contractors. So the language is in the contract. Again, it's an encouragement as opposed to a requirement.
And I was saying that, and through this, is there any way for us to support those local vendors to be ready to do that work for those who come in? That's just, I think that's something to look at. How do we support them to be ready to support those
We could
businesses?
provide the list directly to the company.
Anybody, go ahead.
In the past, we've been passive, so now we're saying we'll be a little more forward.
Go ahead.
Yes. I guess part of that too, Attorney Carmen and staff, might be we look at our mission statement, the parts of it that are in there about diversity in our community and being progressive. Maybe we need to craft that again, go back and revisit it, and then when we talk to these vendors and developers and people, make sure we articulate that to them about the vision of where we see Winston-Salem going and where we want to be.
Okay, next item, please.
The next one is develop and/or enhance partnerships with other organizations to identify potential mentoring firms and to connect them with interested MWBE firms. For example, we've already started having conversations very recently with the Black Chamber of Commerce. So continue those conversations with the Black Chamber as well as the Chamber and figure out if there's ways that we can sort of identify general contractors that might be willing to, or larger businesses that might be willing to partner and mentor smaller business. So continue those conversations. We actually used to have a mentoring program 15 years ago that sort of has gone away, but to sort of jumpstart that whole effort again.
Okay.
Mr. Chairman, I was around to initiate the very first one with the Black Chamber, and of course we had one this time again. And the president said the atmosphere, it was okay the first go round and what they used to do, but the atmosphere now seems to be just wonderful. She was so appreciative that she had to call before she got home to say, we felt good. And I think that's what we want them to do, feel good. Thank you.
Okay. Go ahead.
Number 7, this one's a little bit different than something we've done before, but we definitely want direction from you all on this, but to regularly evaluate general contractors regarding their payment history to subcontractors. If a negative pattern or history exists regarding a poor payment history, then steps should be taken regarding corrective actions or the general contractor be suspended from bidding with the City of Winston-Salem.
Let me make a comment there, and I happen to know several subcontractors in the construction business, and they constantly complain about slow pay from GCs. Then when I talk to the GCs, they complain about slow pay from whoever hired them. And I believe the way the contracts normally read, it's paid when paid. The general pays the sub when they're paid. So I think that the onus for this needs to start with the city.
And the next bullet point does that.
Okay. But to be sure that we are, in fact, paying our bills when
They're due.
They're due. Now, I'm not suggesting we pay for something that hasn't been finished or hasn't been done right or whatever. And then to monitor, and I think, again, I think this would typically be in the construction contract that we would specify that they have to pay their subs and get the lien waivers and all that type of stuff. I think the language is in there.
It's already in there. They
Yeah.
just sometimes don't
But
follow it.
I think the challenge here, and I will not name the organizations because they're in a different county, but one is a municipality in a adjoining county that was 5 or 6 months late paying something to the GC. Now, maybe there was an issue, who knows, but I mean, it was that late.
Well, I don't know if it's true, but I've heard similar, some of our folk we have had contract, and I don't know the ins and outs of if they didn't complete what they were supposed to do, but I think it's important what Councilman Clark stated in terms that we start with ourselves to make sure that we are, when somebody has completed the work and completed the job, that they're paid in a timely manner.
Mr. Mike.
I do think the point of bullet point 7, though, is to try to dig down and identify those contractors who are slow pay on that way out, because then that really can crush a small subcontractor.
Yeah.
And you hear about the same ones over and over
Right.
again.
Yeah.
I mean,
Their reputations are pretty well known.
It wouldn't be difficult to look at what date we paid and what dates their checks were cashed, that type of stuff. Okay.
And Mr. Chairman,
ma'am.
also the general contractors sometimes don't always get to their due dates like they ought to get to them, and I think that needs to be looked at seriously too.
Okay. Last item, please.
And along the same lines, right now we have a retainage, and I think the retainage is 5% of the total project amount. One of the things we possibly would suggest you may want to look at is that whole retainage policy. So right now, let's say you do, I don't know, it's a rehab of a building. And I can use this example because it makes sense. Richie used this one for me as we talk about it. That the roof contractor comes in and does the roofing on the building to stabilize the building. But we're still retaining 5% of that cost of the roofing. Everything else gets done in the building, and it may be 18 months before the rest of the building is done. But because the roof hasn't been done, or because the whole project hasn't been done, we're withholding the 5% of the roof. Even though we know the roof has passed inspection, everything's been done there, there's still that retainage that we're holding. So do we need to look at our retainage policy to figure out if aspects of the retainage can be released based upon an inspection by our folks that it's done, completed, and passed? The one concern of doing this is, of course, if something happens down the road, getting that person back out there, since we've released either a portion or all of his retainage. So one option might be to release a portion of the retainage. But once we've released that retainage for that roof contractor, he's not coming back. So maybe one option is to release some portion, 50% of that 5% retainage might be one option. But we sort of talked about that among us and staff, and if that's something that council wants us to look at, we can sort of flesh out more and bring that back to you all as a couple of concepts. Don't know if anybody's doing it, but just thought it's one way that we could speed up the process.
I understand it, but it does, that long-term piece still lingers out there. So do we have any sense of, one, is there a standard within the construction world within that? And then is there some standard within other municipalities on that same place? Because on that one, that's a little different for me in terms of when you're looking at the full scope of work being done and you're holding that in case something happens, even though you know that piece is done. How do you negotiate with the rest of the project? You all just think of that when you all are coming back with something.
The standard is the 5, so we don't know if there's anybody doing a partial release, but we can look around on that and check.
But I do think realistically, there are very few trades that completely finish months and months and months ahead of some others. Because typically you put the structure up, and then the plumbing and electricity, they kind of rough it in, and then you put the sheetrock on the wall, then they come back, put the fixtures in, and keep going. So but I do like your idea of maybe releasing half of it or something. But take a look, and I would certainly suggest that you talk with, I'm assuming there is an association of contractors and subcontractors and things of that. Maybe your chamber's got a group or somebody that you could bounce some ideas off of. Okay.
So those are sort of the 8 recommendations that are coming straight out of the disparity studies that we have captured. In addition, the city manager has already implemented some modifications to our purchasing guidelines that I think you've already seen the results of today. We also have a couple other recommendations that are outside of the 8 bullet points that just wanted to briefly discuss with you. One of those is to look at ways to completely remarket or rebrand the MWBE program. I think in your information that you have before you today, you have one of the things that's in here is a comparison of the programs across the state.
What page are you on?
It's one of these fold-out pages. Looks like it's the...
It's
They don't
right
have
after
numbers on
18. It's all
20.
Yeah. But it's probably the last 4 or 5 fold-out pages in there.
You talking about all these fold-out pages,
Yeah.
or one in particular? Mine don't have page numbers.
I just noticed they don't have page numbers on.
It has
Yeah.
the title at the top, which
Yeah.
would be the title.
Okay.
What's the title?
MWBE program comparison.
Okay.
27.
That's
Which city?
4 from the back.
In the back, it's got City of Winston-Salem, City of Greensboro.
Yeah.
All right, we can find
Okay.
that one.
But one of the things that I found in doing the comparison between the programs is that Winston-Salem and Raleigh probably have the smallest MWBE program with a single staff person for each, whereas Greensboro has 3 people, Durham has 5 people, Charlotte has 10 people. So we do have a much smaller MWBE staff. One of the things that we talked about as a possibility is looking at, do we want to possibly contract out to market our program and do an extensive marketing and rebranding effort of the MWBE program. So if that's something that you all would like us to look at further, we could do some type of RFP, request for proposals, to solicit companies to see if there's anybody out there. We know of at least one company that is interested in doing a marketing for us of our program. Taking that even one step further, another possibility is, do we privatize the entire MWBE program? We can look at that whole program and see if there's ways that we can privatize it, see if there are any savings in doing that as part of it, but that would include the marketing, the operations of the entire program would be something else that we could look at as a possibility. As far as the 8 bullet points, what we'd like to do is sort of report back in 12 months to see what type of progress there's been, but on these other 2, either RFP for the marketing or RFP to privatize the entire program, I think that's one we're seeking direction from you all today on next steps there.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I wouldn't, for me personally, I wouldn't be beyond us at least doing the RFP or the, 4 agencies or entities that are doing this. Are there other cities in North Carolina that have privatized theirs? And if even outside of North Carolina, Virginia, Georgia, Tennessee, because we've been told if we're only looking at North Carolina, then we're looking at the wrong thing. That's all political government people. We should be looking outside. I would be interested to see what that would look like, a proposal, and what the cost would be, and what would be the goals of the deep dives that they could provide to us, and what benchmarks do they have of successes in other places. I would be interested in that.
Mr. Taylor, welcome, by the way.
Yeah, thank you. I think we all agree that minority and women business participation is something that's very important. I think another option, Mr. Page, that we might be able to explore is the option of hiring more staff. Obviously, Winston-Salem and Raleigh have the smallest amount of staff, and there are other cities who have a little bit more staff, but maybe we can be a little bit more deliberate in our approach when it comes to hiring more staff with marketing and communications and going out and putting more teeth behind the MWBE program. So as we evaluate whether we want to privatize it, I'd like us to also consider the option of hiring more staff and being more deliberate.
Okay. Go ahead.
Particularly on the privatization piece, the proposal has to be very convincing for me to look at a privatization of that area. Now, on the marketing pieces and that kind of stuff, I think that's a little bit different, and I'd like to see some things come along on that side. But to totally privatize this portion of what we do, that proposal would need to be very convincing in what they're going to be able to provide beyond where we are, and some very measurable things that can exist there. And how we market it, I think that's something that we need to do a great job of looking at how we market the program, and even to the extent of looking at how we expand potentially the area. Now, I'm not opposed to that, but my thing would be that if we're looking to expand, it needs to be very clearly and defined what we expect of the individuals in that area, because when we created certain positions in the past, it was specific goals that we wanted to achieve in that process. And there's question now whether or not we've actually been able to get what we intended to get when we did that. And so I think that needs to be very clear if any recommendations come back in terms of expansion of individual personnel within the area. What are we actually going to get? How do we measure that? How do we track the ability of those individuals actually getting us to the place that we desire to be? Because if not, we've just made it look like we're doing more without actually doing more.
Okay. I'll just, and by the way, we got to finish in 2 minutes because next committee's up. First of all, I think you've got 8 specific bullet points we can certainly start working on. We did speak a lot with item number 1, and I think I would welcome some specifics coming back on the mechanics of it. I think the biggest opportunity here is what Lee Garrett has already implemented, and that is the items that are purchased under $20,000. They're purchased on a company credit card or a whatever. And I look forward to seeing that. I think not only MBE, but I think we will do a lot better job of purchasing locally. I'm also very interested in the list of the 244 vendors. We seem to be concerned about marketing and all this, but if there's 244 vendors, that's not that big a list that we could not have a little drop in, let them come or whatever, and meet with the folks. My contention from the beginning is the challenge with the MBE program is the lack of vendors. So many times we spend money and there are no women or minority-owned businesses again and again and again. I'm going to be curious from the list. I think you're going to find there's certain trades that have oodles. But for the most part, and you folks get the same information. Do we get, I think it's in your quarterly, or maybe it's your monthly
report.
Monthly report. There's a whole list of everything that's purchased, and everything on that page is everything over that was competitively bid, I believe.
That's, over 20,000, right?
Yeah, and it's just all sorts of things, a lot of fuel and fire trucks and everything else we buy, but in virtually all that, there are no minority vendors to pick from. So I'm be curious to get that. But I certainly think we've got a lot we can work on here, and I thank you for your efforts. Ms. Adams.
Yes. Again, it goes back to, what staff is doing. What are we doing, and is it working? That's the main thing right there. We look at what we've been doing. Is it working? Yes or no? And how do we get better with it? Because I feel like, okay, we got the economic development classes for starting a new business coming up on October the 28th. That's 8 weeks on Tuesday nights. I plan to attend that because I want to see what it is that we do. Again, as we know as council members, and we do this, all of us, we go to certain things to see if we're really doing that great of a job and what can we learn from it that we can do better. Again, I don't think that we're reaching the people that can be reached. I think that, again, if our folks, if we're telling them the data of what is the market asking for, including the city of Winston-Salem, if businesses don't know, and you want to start a business and you say, okay, I'm going to do landscaping. We already know we got plenty of landscaping, grass cutters and whatever. Maybe they want to specialize just a little bit more. It separates them from the pack. And I think we're in a position to help people with that type of information. But I think we're going in the wrong direction. But I want the people that are here tonight to understand this is a process that we're going through here in Winston-Salem. And please don't be discouraged at anything that we're doing. Again, we're doing what we're supposed to do as council, that we're working through the process to ensure that it's good when it comes out as a finished product.
Okay. Mr. Montgomery, I'll give you the last word.
And there's 2 things. One is in reference to those areas that we may see on that list in the county where we have an absence of minority-owned businesses that are there. My push would be, what do we do to encourage individuals in those fields, and what are the obstacles that keep individuals from doing it? And some of it may be financially in terms of what it costs to start up a business in that area in terms of doing that, and then looking at what are the cost benefits to encourage individuals to enter into those categories that we see limit small numbers or none at all that are in there. And then the other piece is, I know that the city manager has mentioned in conversation before in terms of this this policy that is implemented here recently, in terms of how do we challenge our greater community. I know the chamber does things around buy local and those things, but really, how do we challenge or push our larger entities in our community to do a lot more within their purchasing pieces here locally, from our hospitals, our financial institutions, our educational institutions? What happens when they take a look also at where they spend their money? How does that impact us locally in terms of jobs and job creation here for us?
Okay. Thank you for all your comments. We will stand adjourned, and Mr. Taylor, when do you want to convene? In 5 minutes?
Public safety will meet in 5 minutes.
In 5 minutes. Thank you all for coming tonight.